We said we're going to take 2 weeks off. It's going to be super relaxing.
And then I broke myself.
Then you broke yourself.
So let me tell everybody the story. Well, should we welcome everyone to Fated Mates first, or should we banter first?
No, welcome everyone to Fated Mates Season 5. I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write them.
And I am Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader and editor and kind of klutz, if we're going to be real honest.
Well, you're not in pieces anymore because
I've been fixed.
Surgically put back together.
I'm the bionic woman right now.
Humpty Dumpty.
So basically, everybody, here's what happened. Okay, I'm going to also tell you, this is like a true story. So I'm blaming myself, obviously. I'm not suing anyone. Although several people have suggested I should, which I want you to know,
No.
This is all my fault, everyone. But
don't bring that down upon yourself. The universe won't love that.
No, that's not right. So anyway, here's the funny part. I forgot until I looked at my camera roll this morning. The day before I left to take Little Romance back to college, my colleague, Wayne, who is the science teacher, had a new skeleton delivered to school. I learned a lot about this, by the way. Like, did you know that, like, back in the day, like, your high school skeleton probably was a real skeleton? Now they're fake. And I was super grossed out by this whole entire story. Wayne's telling me about
And they just come from medical schools. Like, they finished dissecting them in gross anatomy. By the way, did you love that movie when you were young? Because I loved that movie when I was young.
I did love that movie when I was young.
And Matthew Modine, look, every blonde hero I've ever written, and I know, like, grown men don't have blonde hair. Like, I know that. But part of the reason why I have written several blonde heroes is because of Matthew Modine.
Fair.
So, thanks,
Fair.
Gross anatomy. Anyway.
The
skeletons come from there.
Skeletons now are fake. Wayne, I went away to a meeting and came back to my desk. Everybody can look down and you'll see this right now. Wayne set up the skeleton at my desk, put on my headphones, my Northwestern hat, and had it playing with my mouse. And I just saw this in my photo roll and was like, Wayne, did you put some kind of horror movie whammy on me? Like, you set up a skeleton at my desk and the next day I broke my arm.
Wait, so were you going to sue Wayne?
No, I'm not suing anybody. I'm suing my own self for being a dummy.
I don't think that would hold up in court.
I think Wayne is like a horror novel in action.
Wayne cursed me with a fake skeleton.
Listen, Wayne orders bugs in boxes, right? Wayne sometimes has boxes of eyeballs delivered. I mean, what are these kids doing in science? I don't know.
Wait. If I remember correctly from my human physiology class in 11th grade, there are 2 bones in your forearm.
There are.
And one of them is called the
ulna.
radius and the ulna.
I broke the radius.
I was going to show off.
Well, I did not know. I've learned a lot. So basically, everybody.
Which one is that? Is the radius on the inside or the thumb side or the other side?
I don't know where it is, but I'm going to tell you what it does.
Somebody out there is screaming at their
I know.
radio.
I'm sorry, everybody. Everybody, if you put your arm straight out right now with your hand down, and now just rotate your arm so that your hand is up. What does that is the radius, that bone that allows you to essentially just
Oh boy, that feels important.
It does feel important. That's why they said I needed surgery and not a cast, because if they just put a cast on it, and it didn't heal right, I wouldn't be able to, turn my arm. Which feels important for things like driving, cooking.
Blood hand jobs. That's a deep cut from season 3.
That is a deep cut from season 3. People are rediscovering that blood hand job all the time, though. And I think
somebody
it's
tweeted about it yesterday, and it was chef's kiss.
Yeah. So everybody, here's what really happened, though. If you're like, okay, I now know about the break. I know about Wayne. I know about the skeletons in the classroom. What you don't know is the way I broke my arm, which is I took Little Romance to college. Mr. Reed's Romance went to California because his sister had a baby, and so he was going to see her and the baby.
It's a very good-looking baby.
Oh, it's a beautiful baby. And so I was like, you go, I will take Little Romance to college. And so we arrived in Hartford, Connecticut on Thursday night. And on Friday, we were going to do our shopping. We went to Target. We went to World Market. We bought a rug. We bought all this stuff. And then we are almost done. We had to go to the like Sephora because he needed like facial cleanser or whatever. And there was a Nordstrom at the mall. And I thought, well, I look at these cute shoes. I saw someone wearing these really cute platform Doc Marten sandals.
Oh, you're too old for platforms.
I certainly am because I tried them on. And you know what the thing is, like, they're too loose because they're the wrong size, and you don't really tighten the straps all the way because they're so like stiff when they're new. And I just was like, so I took like literally one step and fell on my face and put my hands out to break my fall. And that is how I broke my radius.
And you got what Kate Claiborne's husband refers to as a foosh.
A foosh
Fracture, which means falling on outstretched hand.
Yeah.
So way to go, medicine.
I know. I'm like, thank you very much. So I spent a lot. Okay, here's my other little piece of advice, everybody. I went to urgent care. I was in Connecticut. I didn't know where I was going. Mistakes were made. If you think there is any risk that you have a broken bone, you should just go to the ER. I wasted a lot of time in urgent care.
Because they can't set the leg in urgent care.
I've been kind of beating myself up about this, and I, like, you know how it's hard, but if I had been here, I would have, all the urgent cares in Chicago are like related to the hospital.
Oh, really? You don't have like urgent, just general, like get your flu shot urgent care?
They do, but I wouldn't go to them, right? I go to the University of Chicago urgent care or Northwestern urgent care, and then you're like in the hospital system. So anyway, I ended up at the Hartford ER. I spent 10 hours in the ER. Oh, wait, here's another really funny story. Mr. Reed's Romance, as I said, was in California and was like, should I come? And I was like, no, it's fine. Like, we're fine. Sarah came the next day and rescued me. But that night, Little Romance took me to the ER. We went to the Hartford hospital at like 8 p.m. and we just parked the car. Because I was like, I don't know where we are. Just park. There's a valet. Just park the valet. But then it became very clear that I was going to be there all night. And I, in fact, was there until 6 a.m. So around 11 p.m., I'm texting him. Of course, it's still COVID protocols, right? They wouldn't let him in with me, which I understand. But I was like, I want you to go back to the hotel. I don't want you. I was like stressing out about my college-age son just like hanging out in a place I didn't know and they wouldn't even let him in the waiting room. It was like wait outside. So anyway, I went to the nurse and I was like, I want my son to go home, but I have the valet ticket. So I give the guy the valet ticket and $100 in cash because if you valeted at a hospital in Chicago, it would probably be $50 an hour, right? So the guy looks at me and he looks at this money and he is like, okay. So he just goes out and finds Little Romance and gives him this. And then like 10 minutes later, I get a text from him that's like, Mom, it was $6. And I was like, what? You valet parked the car for 4 hours. How could it be $6? Thank you. So that was the one thing that went my way. Thank you, Hartford Hospital, for deeply affordable valet. I'm sure the rest of it will not be economical, but here we are.
Well, but fun side note, we did get to see each other. I got to help move Lil Romance into his room.
Yes.
Lil Romance has an adorable roommate. An adorable roommate.
Yes.
Who had an adorable family. Now listen, what we learned here was also that adorable roommates bring large amounts of family members to immediately turn their room into Bed Bath & Beyond.
It was so cute.
It was
right?
amazing.
It was amazing.
Little Romance was like, it's fine. I'll just live out of boxes for 3 weeks. But the roommate was great. And she had already unpacked
I know
3 books that were on her desk because, as she said, I'm trying to be a reader now.
So we are going to send that you guys were going to send a box
of books. And Colleen Hoover's It Ends With Us was one of them.
And then it was Lucy Score, right?
It was Lucy Foley, who writes a great mystery.
Okay. Yeah.
And so we were like, listen, so Jen had a lot, immediately was going to just talk at this girl about what books she should read.
Okay, but I was injured, everybody. It's fine. Sarah redirected me. I was
like, it's going to be fine. We're going to help. But anyway, we're sending Lil Romance's amazing roommate a box of great romances.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Because that is what we do as fairy godmothers to college-age children.
Sprinkle these books throughout the dorm.
Listen, team, if you have a college student who is reading books on TikTok, Jen and I have a plan for you this year.
Yeah.
Oh, look, sequitur.
Look how it's going. Perfect.
So season 5 is basically just going to continue to be our normal bullshit, right? Like
the same
we're
bullshit.
Gonna do. It's just every episode will start with banter. Hopefully nobody will break a bone.
Whew.
We are going to continue with Trailblazers because we love them and we know you all love them. By the way, thank you to everybody who filled out our listener survey last year.
Yes.
Almost 2,000 people.
It was amazing.
Filled out our listener survey. So thank you so much for giving 10 minutes to us and telling us about, what you like and don't like about us. We're trying not to be too hurt. No, generally, you were all amazing. But we know you all love Trailblazers, and that's great because we do too, and we were planning to do more of them anyway, but now we're all on the same page. Everybody gets a win.
Perfect.
We will continue to do interstitials. We already have dozens of topics for interstitials, but as you know, you can always text us. I mean, don't text us because I don't answer most of my texts. So but you can either tweet us
Sure.
at Fated Mates, or Instagram us at Fated Mates Pod and tell us if there's an interstitial you really want. And you can be sort of, obscure even. If there's a microtrope you really love, we are here for you, or at least we'll try to be. We have plans for some cool interviews coming.
Yes.
We have plans for some deep dives. Our first deep dive of the season, which is probably 2 weeks from now, but we wanted to announce it. We announced it at the end of last season, but we're going to officially announce it now on Breaking the In Case of Emergency box. And we are reading Marrying Winterborn.
Yes.
And I cannot wait to understand all of the references that everyone makes on Twitter. And I'm fully prepared to just be laid low by Reese.
Appropriate. Yes. It's going to be amazing. I'm so excited.
I can't wait. So that is our first read. You can get it literally everywhere books are sold.
Yes.
So order it now.
And it is a terrific audiobook too, which we've said. Our Mary Jane Wells, our favorite, does a great Welsh accent, and it's real hot. So highly recommended.
I love it.
If you're an audiobook person.
Can't wait. But we're also doing this other thing, which is if you liked, then you should read.
Yes.
And so, Jen, explain it.
I guess one of the things I would like us to talk about is
this episode is just first episode of the season, you guys. We'll talk about books, but
we're going to talk about the August 23rd Buzzsaw. That's what I've been calling it. There's a really interesting thing that has been said about romance for a long time, right? Which is romance kind of keeps the lights on, right? That basically when romance is hot, so many books are being sold by the romance genre that it essentially is keeping the rest of publishing sort of afloat. And this has been also one of those things though where people are kind of wait, really? Right? I think there's a lot of people that question the math of that. Now, the other big thing we saw this summer was the PRH, right, versus DOJ trial, where essentially the Department of Justice is suing to prevent Penguin Random House from acquiring Simon & Schuster. And that was a really fascinating trial. We'll try and find a good explainer because the trial itself was just really fascinating look into kind of the world of publishing. You had lots of people on the stand answering questions about the business of publishing, and it was just really fascinating. I can't say more than that because I am not smart enough to even understand half the time what they were talking about, right? There's a lot of numbers, there's a lot of talk being thrown around, and
so much interesting data that we haven't seen before, or at least doesn't usually see the light of day. Things like something like 90% of all published books sell fewer than 2,000 copies.
Right.
Which is it's fascinating when you start thinking about what this industry is, how it was built, what it is supposed to do, the way we think about it. I think one of the things that I don't know if it's good or bad. I think it's probably bad, but I don't know. I mean, tell us. But, one of the things that I keep thinking about, and I've talked about here, is this like mythology of publishing as a public service.
Yes.
Right? Like there's and I love that. I'm a writer. Of course I love that. Libraries are a public service. Like books should be available free to whoever wants them through a public service. But the truth is publishing is a business.
Yeah.
And, the trial put that front and center. And I think it really shook up a lot of us in a lot of ways. It shook up people who work for publishers. It shook up artists and authors. And, everybody kind of had no choice but to stare at publishing as a business for a little while.
I think, and of course, as a reader, right, it's very clear that publishing is a business, right? But it's not my business, right?
That's not your business. And I mean that in both ways. It's not your business, capital B, nor is it your business, lowercase b. Like, you just need the books to arrive in your life.
Exactly. So it's also really fascinating to kind of watch a trial about something you're deeply invested in, kind of emotionally, right? Does that make sense?
Well, I spend a lot of time, right, saying, and I think about this a lot on Twitter in general, like, and in social media, the way social media has changed the industry, right?
Yeah.
Has made me think a lot about, like, not in front of the kids, right? Like, there are so many people who don't need to know how the sausage is made, right? Like,
right.
And obviously that's different if, like, you've made if you've made a book and there's some terrible stuff that's happened during the making of that book, then obviously that's a different thing. But like in general, you don't need to know all the minutia of what it takes to put a Sarah McLean novel on the shelf, right? I want it to be a little magical for you. And that trial it was not magical.
In a lot of ways, the publishing relies on like breakout hits to make money, because once you start paying people like, essentially like, we think you can sell this much, right? Like it's more of a steady bet, right? Like we're going to pay you this advance because we think you can sell this much. But like a huge breakout hit that can just sell like gangbusters is of course just like, money in. And I thought that was just like a really interesting way. Like, I mean, and of course, if you're in publishing, you're probably like, well, duh. But right, as a reader, it just seems so backwards in some ways that like big advances don't necessarily guarantee big sales. And of course, a lot of the discussion in the trial was about like people getting those really big advances. And that's not really necessarily something that most romance authors are not in that bucket. So It also felt in a lot of ways like it just felt like, I don't know, like publishing is like a different story for different people, I guess, right?
Yeah. I mean, and what's interesting about that, and it goes to this conversation that, every once in a while, someone in romance is like, are we sure romance keeps the lights on, right? And it's interesting because Colleen Hoover came up again and again and again in that trial.
Of course.
And when you look at, we're going to talk about August 23rd, Allie Hazelwood had a book out that week. Like Emily Henry has been just like crushing it over the pandemic. Christina Lauren also. So, and I think that there is, what was fascinating about that is refracted through the lens of this, when that is the question that romance noodles sometimes, when it's refracted through the lens of this trial, it's so clear that romance really is a juggernaut still. Like the idea of selling fewer than 2,000 copies for the majority of traditionally published romance novels is anathema, right? Like in order to make the profit and loss statement work, you have to sell more than 2,000 copies. And so it's just fascinating because I kept thinking about genre, and as you know, whenever anything like this happens, obviously it is my business, capital B. And so I think a lot about like romance. I think about genre. I spent a lot of time thinking about Jane Ann Krentz, talking about the purpose of genre, right? This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Mary Rudder, author of the Kindle Vella serial fiction piece, Love on the Ropes.
This is a terrific premise because we all know how much I love a woman with an amazing, cool job. And in this case, Mackenzie is a professional wrestler.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And she has like an old lover in her past, Tay. He's just like a staid businessman. When something happens and all of a sudden the two of them are responsible for watching and taking care of 3 children, not only do they have to let the past go, but they have to care for these kids and get along with each other. And, of course, old feelings come back to the surface. What?
Yeah.
All that time apart, and now they're just back together again, Sarah.
Well, if you love enemies to lovers, if you love second chance romance, if you love opposites attracting in your romance, which of course you do.
If you love a woman, also literally kicking butt. I mean, I just need to say that, right?
I mean, absolutely. Absolutely. And like, mayhem with children, which is basically a description of our lives. You will love Love on the Ropes. It is a Kindle Vella serial story. Head over to Kindle Vella for more information, or you can follow Mary Rudder at her website, maryrudder.com, or on Instagram at author Mary Rudder. Links, as always, are in show notes. Thanks to Mary Rudder for sponsoring the episode. One of the first witnesses, although I don't know if they're called witnesses in this kind of trial, but one of the first experts in this trial was Stephen King, who's also a genre writer, right? Like lots of conversation from both sides of the argument about authors who are genre authors, right? Big mystery authors, big thriller authors, big romance authors, and the way genre carries so much of the weight of traditional publishing in money, like the finances of it, versus all these other books that are I'm not diminishing their importance in the world,
but they don't sell. I mean, I can't even imagine how many copies of a book Stephen King must sell, right? I mean,
right. I mean, millions, right?
But his whole point too was like, we used to have.
Well, he was so interesting because he talked about how he even still today thinks about publishers as like, if he writes something that's really horror focused,
yes,
right, a true textbook horror novel, he might bring it to a smaller publisher that can really focus on that. And I think that's really fascinating. I mean, there were so many little fascinating pieces to this puzzle. And, so yeah, we'll post recaps and you can draw your own conclusions about the trial itself.
To me, the other thing, though, is about like this question of like, is romance keeping the lights on? Like, if you look at the top 50 books, 20 of them are Colleen
for the
Hoover.
last like 3 years.
Yeah, right?
Like, I mean, since the beginning of the pandemic.
You know what? And so it's part of me is like, I don't know how anyone can look at those lists and think romance is not just in a huge power position right now, right?
You have to name the source, right? Like, This is TikTok. It is.
Of course.
It's hard to believe. I remember when, the first time somebody said the words TikTok and book talk to me, it was like it was like spring of 2020. And we knew that like something was going on TikTok. And I remember having multiple conversations back then where we all said like, oh, it's flash in the pan. It's just like it's a random thing. It'll be gone in 6 months. It is not gone. Book Talk is not gone. It may well be gone in 6 months, right? Such is social media. But like the power of TikTok in romance cannot be denied at this point. And I mean, obviously there was a piece in NPR that sort of vaguely touched on this, but obviously it's a very white, very young, very cis, very, a very like very narrow lens that is boosting these TikTok books.
Yeah. Well, and what's interesting, I would say, is in the the more YA space, it seems, at least in YA TikTok, not just romance, right? YA TikTok seems to be more queer friendly. At least this was the case a couple of months ago. But, I also have big concerns about, like, you can't even say the word sex on TikTok, right? So we have all of these young people coming up with, like, new words to get around those filters, right? In order to talk about what they're reading in these books.
Well, spicy, right?
Spicy,
become, like,
right?
the code.
Or, like, segs is, like, SE, right? I feel like I'm like an old lady. Let me tell you what the kids are saying on TikTok. But
no, but when we were talking about this, like, I had a book out August 23rd, and when marketing, we had, our marketing conversation, and it was sort of like, well, what are the buzzwords that are on TikTok that, like, might help get attention for the book? I mean, that's what marketing is, right? There's been a lot over the summer. There was a lot of conversation about, like, should we be marketing these books via trope? And I sort of think that that's, like, not really a very interesting conversation for me, in the sense that, like, marketing is marketing, and we have always marketed books in this kind of way, even though it feels a little more shorthanded now. But we're having conversations with people in 240 characters. So,
like, I guess what you and I are both fascinated by, though, is the fact that this doesn't feel like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter felt like we were marketing to people who are already romance readers.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
No, that's not what's happening.
That is not what's happening
it's
here.
Awesome. And
that's the part that's exciting, I think,
this
for both
is
of
the
us.
part that I'm so excited about. So at the beginning of the summer, I did an event with Christina Lauren in Connecticut for Something Wilder, which was their book that came out in May. I did an event with Tessa Bailey in August in the same place in Connecticut for Heartbreaker. And the people who came, there were a number of women who came twice, right? Like, who, had been at both events. But across it, when you have an event like that, you end up talking to the readers who come to that event. I love talking to readers about what they're reading, like, how long they've been reading. And with me, often, especially when I'm there with Tessa or I'm there with Christina and Lauren, there's a sense of, like, a lot of people who've never tried historical, but, like, are interested in historical. And so many readers started reading romance in March of 2020. And we all know why. Because it smelled like existential despair, right?
Right. And romance is so joyful and hopeful, and right? I mean, of course.
Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense. And what's so amazing is when you look at the sheer numbers that somebody like Colleen is selling, somebody like Emily is selling, you're looking, like, just so many books. Julia Quinn and the burst of Bridgerton books. I mean, Bridgerton came out Christmas 2020. I mean, a perfect example of, like, a perfect time for that show. We were all stuck at home with nothing to do on Christmas Day, right? And those books, which were 20 years old, kaboom, right? Just sticking to the bestseller lists. And the fact that romance did that and is selling so many books means those are all new readers.
Right.
And I just want to say welcome. Like, I hope season 5 of Fated Mates is your jam. So this is all a way to get back to one of the things that we're going to do during season 5 is choose some of these books and say, if you liked it, here are a number of other romances that you'll probably like just as much.
Right. Because I feel like that's the part, like, the trick now for us is, okay, so listen, there is not a single romance reader out there that isn't, like, devastated when you hit the end of someone's backlist, right?
Oh, the worst.
The worst. And so what you are constantly, so for all of, Colleen Hoover's new readers out there, for all of Allie Hazelwood's new readers out there, the question is, like, what is out there for you after you hit the backlist, right? And also I would say, look, romance, I have been, you and I have been reading romance for a long time. romance, if I don't want it to change like from minute to minute, but if I think about how it's changed over time, of course it's changing. And so this is like an opportunity, right? I don't think that any of us have to feel anything but excited about the idea that there is new readers, new interest in romance, right? Like this is something I think that we just have to this is a great opportunity for us to embrace those new readers, welcome to them to the fold, and say, like, hey, we've got more books for you. You don't have to feel destitute once you hit the end of Colleen Hoover's backlist. We got you. And so we are really interested if you are, and by the way, we hope this will work in the inverse, right? If you're like, okay, I've never read a Colleen Hoover book, but I love these books, so maybe this is a good place for me to start. And, that's pretty cool too. So I think that there are ways in which we are really hoping that, season 5 of Fated Mates, we have really spent a lot of time looking at the past, right? In season 4, because we are so invested in ourselves and our history. But I think this is a really cool opportunity for us to also be like, and, who knows what the future will be like? That's exciting. It's exciting.
I just feel like every single... Oh, God, so many new readers.
And there are
so many books for them.
I know.
So many books to find.
I know.
It's going to be great, you guys. Welcome.
Great.
The water is fine.
It is. It's amazing. So there's a couple other things that we were going to maybe talk about today. So I had suggested to Sarah that we should talk about August 23rd.
Yes, let's talk about August 23rd.
Well, August 23rd was weird, right? Because so the reason August 23rd I keep thinking about is because it felt like every single romance novel that I was looking forward to all summer from trade publishing was released essentially on that day. And I feel like I'm curious about that only because it seemed different. Like it seems like it used to be that traditional publishing would sort of meter out like one new book a week. And now there seem to be migrating more to like they all come out on the same day at like the last day of the month. And I was like, is there how cops are always pulling people over on the last day of the month to like make their budget? Is that what's happening here? Like what's going on?
That's a good question. And one of our Trailblazers is an editor, and we can ask her that exact question because the final Tuesday of June is the final day of the fiscal quarter, like the final Tuesday of the fiscal quarter, right? So it would make sense that they'd want to really...
Sure.
Certainly that's summer, right? That's
right.
A lot of big books come out in late May and early June.
Yeah.
Not just because it's summer, but also because you can end your fiscal year with
a bang. Yeah. Your quarter.
Think of it. Yeah. You can end it's the end of the year. So but the last Tuesday of the month has always been and what's interesting is in publishing, and this is really inside baseball, but it used to be that the last Tuesday of August was actually a September book. That's what they called it because all the real, the sales were all posted.
Yeah.
The next.
Well, this is what happens in December, right? Like if your book comes out the last week of December, it's really the next year's book, correct?
Yeah, exactly. It was. It's not anymore. I don't know. But then. That was really mass markety. That wasn't the case with hardcovers. Wasn't the case with trades.
Yeah. Okay.
And now there are I don't know. Evelyn Hugo just came out last week, or not Evelyn.
Carrie Soto.
Carrie Soto is back. Came out last week, and that's that's obviously a huge book for the fall. They're expecting. So, I think that that last Tuesday of the month thing is going away in a lot of ways. Another sort of tradition that's just not necessary anymore because you can put trade paperbacks out
whenever,
anytime. Yeah. You can put anything out anytime now. So it's also probably about we'll put that on our question list for the editor that we're going to interview because it feels like there's got to be another good reason, which is something probably they paid for 4 weeks of space for the books before. And so, they rotate them out once a month and it just makes it easier for everyone.
Yeah. But that day, right? Now again, this was mostly a traditionally published day, right? I don't I mean, I don't know, anybody outside of Chelsea Cameron, I think, had a new release that day, and she's indie. But I mean,
I love Chelsea's books.
Yeah,
too.
I do too. And we should
So
look up the
we're going to
title.
put all of these books in.
Yeah.
We're going to put all these books in show notes.
Yeah,
so that you
because
can see what we're
the
talking
problem is like, and this is why I was calling it a buzzsaw, right? Like, top line, you've got Heartbreaker, Ruby Fever, if you're a paranormal person, right? And the third book of the second Hidden Legacy trilogy, right? So book 6 in Hidden Legacy. And you also have Allie Hazelwood's Love on the Brain. I mean, that is just a
big.
huge.
That's a big combo.
That's a big, right? So you've got like, but then you have like kind of, you know.
It was historic. I mean,
right? You have
the historicals that came out that day were.
Right? You have Miss Bev's To Catch
Beverly
a Raven.
Jenkins's To Catch a Raven. Sophie Jordan's
Yep.
Scoundrel Falls Hard. Eva Devin's Much Ado About Dukes. Was that week? I think. Emily Sullivan's The Hellion and the Hero.
Yes.
Emily's a great historical writer. And then J.J. McAvoy's first historical.
Right.
Aphrodite and the Duke, which I saw everywhere.
Yeah. Right. So it just felt like if you weren't, it was so easy to kind of lose sight of the, you know, kind of newer books, debut books, smaller books. And I do not say that in a pejorative way, right? Like, it's just hard if you're in the wake of Love on the Brain that day and Heartbreaker, right? Like, that's a big thing. So one of the things that I was trying to do was really look up, like, what were some of the other books that came out that week. There was also people are loving a book called The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy.
Which is a fantasy. Those of you who are always looking for us to talk more about fantasy. Yep. I have not read it, but I'm excited to.
Kate read it and loved it. The other thing that came out that week that I honestly, like, I loved it so much that I went back and read, I'm now reading the first book in the series, it's a small town series called Blue Cedar Falls by Jeannie Chin, and I read Return to Cherry Blossom Way, and I loved it so much. That also came out on the 23rd, that I went back, and now I'm reading the first book in the series called The Inn on Sweetbriar Lane. And these are like, I was so charmed. I'm so charmed by these books.
Wait, can we do some more?
Yeah.
I have others.
Oh yeah,
too.
there's so many. It's
Piper
wild.
Rain, who we
love Piper Rain. Yes,
Piper Rain have been on the Piper and Rain have been on the podcast before. Their book, My Fake Fiancé, featuring a plus size heroine, so I'm for it. Came out then. Also, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches came out that day. That's by Sangu Mandana. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that.
That's right.
And that's like about a orphanage for young girls who are also witches. But also they're like, it sounds like the woman who runs the orphanage falls in love over the course of the book. And then Naima, our favorite, had a desire out called Black Sheep Bargain, which was delicious. And Rebecca Zanetti had started a series, Wolf. It's just called Wolf, and I'm for it. And Jennifer Ryan,
oh, that's right, I picked up that
writes
one too.
a great romantic suspense. Has a book called Surrendering to Hunt out. And so, like, I mean, and Jennifer Ryan is a hugely popular contemporary author. So they're just, it was an embarrassment of riches,
and
honestly.
And I'm sure we have not even
We've missed so many.
I mean, I will go back and look. Go ahead, keep going,
Jen. We missed Ivy Owens. So Ivy Owens is one half of Christina Lauren. Lauren has written a contemporary celebrity romance called Scandalized under the name Ivy Owens, and that debuted August 23rd.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Blair Babylon, author of A Billionaire in Disguise, the first book in the Royal Billionaire romance series.
Look, I love it. Just layer the tropes right off, one on top of another, and I'm just going to put them straight into my brain. Jen, everyone tells you that a reckless tryst at a party will ruin your life.
Except in romance.
Not in romance, it won't. In romance, that tryst will end you up with a hot billionaire who just so happens to have a royal secret. So our heroine is a small town girl who's super broke, and she goes to a party and she makes what she thinks is a terrible mistake with tall, ripped, tantalizing Wolf.
Listen,
with his
you're not. Everyone out there,
sapphire-
if he is
No.
tall, rich, tantalizing, and his name is Wolf, it is not a mistake. I promise you.
I mean, that all signs point to this being a very, very good idea. So anyway, he's hot. He's super ripped under his tuxedo. He's super rich and also apparently into some wild stuff, if you know what I mean. And I think you do, Jennifer.
I like this.
Blair Babylon writes what we like to call thrillers that bang. So if you like thrillers that bang, because we do here at Fated Mates, you should try Blair. The first book in her Billionaire in Disguise series is available right now for free in ebook.
Yeah, and then you can pick up the rest of the series because you are going to move right through them. So thank you to Blair for sponsoring this week's episode of Fated Mates. That's why I've been calling it the Buzzsaw, right? Just because I was like, you cannot possibly... I had so many books arriving at my house that day. I pre-ordered so many, right? On various like pre-order now kind of things. So there were so many good books that came out that day that it was hard to keep up with them all. And the thing that's hard about that with romance, the thing I am sad about, I guess I would say, is... it's not a bad thing. It's a nice thing. There are always new books coming out, right? Mm-hmm. That it sometimes is hard for like to get enough oxygen, right? On a day like that where we just listed probably 20, it feels like 20 books that came out. How can you read them all in 1 week before like the next group of them start coming out? And so that's why it's been kind of fun, I think, for us to kind of think, okay, how can we go back and read some of these and pay attention to them and not necessarily like let them just like get away from us? How can we like, kind of keep some of these circulating? So we really wanted to spend some time on our first episode being like, hey, listen, you think you got what you needed on August 23rd, but you need to go back. There's still more books out there that you missed because it was impossible to keep up with them all.
It was a big day, and you know what it felt like? It felt like a real old-fashioned romance day.
Yes.
Like this is something that it just doesn't feel this way very often anymore, but where like there's like a big book that's coming out and everyone is excited.
Yeah.
And part of that is because, we talked, for example, in the first season, we talked about Lothair, right? So it's season 5, first episode. Our first season was focused on Kresley Cole's Immortals After Dark series, for those of you who are new to us this week. And that season, we talked about Lothair, which is, I don't remember, number 10 of the series or whatever it is. And that was really the moment where the series had grown and grown and grown and grown, but Lothair was the book that everybody was waiting for. And like they wrapped a bus with his face and they sent Kresley all over the country on like a big tour, and people waited in line at midnight to get this book. And it felt like, oh, there's a big book coming out. Mm-hmm. That happens less now. And the reason why it happens less is because romance is so much bigger now. Yes. Right? The pool is so much bigger. Self-publishing and indie publishing is such a like rich community of readers. Yeah. And authors and tropes and topics and everything. There's something for everyone now in romance in a way that like even 15 years ago there was not.
Right.
And so now, like, because of that, there are fewer and fewer huge, like, books that everybody in the whole community is watching.
Reading at the same time. Exactly.
Right. But August 23rd felt like there was something for everyone that day.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's it.
And it was great.
It was great. I feel like that's how it should feel, right? We even looking at it, like I'm kind of like seeing like, what did we miss, right? You were right about Much Ado About the Dukes by Ava Devon. There's also a Susanna Allen historical. These are really cool historical paranormals called A Duke at the Door that came out that day. I mean, it was wild how many books came out, and just really, like I said, I think that's exactly how it felt. It felt like an exciting day. Like all day on Twitter, people were like, oh my God, what are you reading today?
Yeah.
Because there was just so much that had like sort of hit, everybody was like, I just got 6 books delivered. And that's, listen, I love that
It's
feeling.
cool.
It was really cool.
So it's a big day. It felt really old fashioned and I really liked it. So, and there were I've read several of those books now and like, they're just, every one of them was great. So head out to your store, your local store.
Yes.
And do that because it was really fun.
Yeah.
What else do we want to talk about?
Do we want to do this really fun question we got? Which was...
Oh, yeah, let's talk about it.
So I think we have one more thing we're going to maybe do this morning. I know this is like just a all over the place episode, but it's, my arm's broken. I'm doing the best I can.
Oh, wait. Well, first, before we do that, Can we talk about... Have you read anything over the last couple of weeks? Oh, you said Jeannie Chin.
Oh, my God. I'm so into these Jeannie Chin books, you guys. I'm like eating them. Oh, listen, the first one, which is like the one about the inn... listen, you will love this too. Like, how you have these things that is like, you're just like your catnip. It's like small town, but which is not really my catnip. Here's the other thing, like the exception that proves the rule. That's how these books feel to me. So, June Woo is, runs the local inn, and all of a sudden the guy buys the quilt shop next door and is just like doing crazy, mad, like noisy construction all night.
The quilt shop.
I know, listen,
next door.
He's turning it into a bar. He is an ex-military guy. His name's Clay. So this is not the one that came out August 23rd. Everybody, I'll talk more about that later, but you're going to go back and read book number 1. You're going to thank me. Book number 1 is Clay is ex-military, and his best friend who like died in action grew up in this same town. And his dream was like, and his friend's name was Bug, was like, he's going to go back, or his like, army name or whatever, go back and like open up a bar on Main Street and just like make it like Main Street was always too cutesy for Bug, but he wanted a place for like regular people. And so June and Clay are like essentially kind of, they've got a little enemies to lovers kind of vibe at the beginning because he thinks everyone in this town is going to hate what he's up to. But she's like, I want to help you. Like, I want to revitalize this town. And I feel like the other thing I've always struggled with in, small town romance is like, how is this small town staying alive? And this book is really explicitly dealing with that. Like, right? Like, what are the struggles these small businesses are facing and how are they trying to like drum up support in the local community, but also as like a tourist destination to keep their town alive? But like, it's hot. Like, he's taciturn and doesn't want to talk. He just wants to like rip shit out and build his bar. And I'm like, listen, this is great. This is great. I love it. I am super into it. Like, all I want to do now is read Jeannie Chin books. That's how I feel.
I love it too. I tore through the Mila Finelli series finally.
Oh, yeah.
Man, that last one, Mafia Madman.
Yep.
Wowzer. These books are so hot. They're mafia romances, so, take that with a grain of, with like a whole side of salt lick, if you will. They're so hot. These heroes are, would we say heroes? They are so intense. This particular hero, the Mafia Madman hero, is so intense. And has really been through it.
Yes.
And is out for blood.
Yes.
And so he kidnaps the sister-in-law of his enemy.
I know.
And
fine.
Keeps her in a cage on her boat. And I just...
Yes.
It was great. I was really for it, honestly.
I was like, okay.
All right then.
I worked on that book, and it was really fun to kind of be like, I think you could do more with this cage.
Yeah. Yeah, well done. I also have to say, I started On the Hustle this morning.
Oh, God, that's on my list. Yeah.
which is Adriana Herrera's
so good.
new book that's out in October. You can pre-order it now. The heroine has like a real job, but also on the side, like her dream, her like side hustle is interior design of bedrooms in the style of your favorite book, which honestly sounds like the greatest thing ever.
God.
And like, I'm sort of tempted to like call Adriana and say like, would you just like, could you do this just for my bedroom, which remains unpacked after 6 months of living in this house?
Oh, you're making fun of Little Romance for not unpacking, and now we see the truth.
I just here. You know what? Game sees game.
Yeah.
Game acknowledges game.
There you go. Funny.
So no, I just think this is such a cool job. And so like basically if you love, if you love Milla Vane's,
yeah,
A Heart of Blood and Ashes, this character will build you,
yes,
a fur-filled,
yeah,
bedroom for you to, explore your kink in. It's so fun already. I'm like 2 chapters in and I'm wild about it. And I mean, look, Adriana writes a sexy book. She writes a heroine who knows exactly what she wants. In this particular case, the hero is about to chase her like fully across the country because he realizes he made a big mistake. And I feel confident that she's going to make him suffer.
As it should be.
This episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Lumi Labs, creators of Microdose Gummies.
Microdosing has been around for a long time, is commonly associated with psychedelics, wellness, performance enhancement, and creativity. And there are lots of benefits if you are looking to try something that is going to chill you out ever so slightly.
Listen, and I just want to say, I went on vacation at the end of August, and it was a week at the beach, and I had like been going through some stress leading up to it. And so I decided I was going to try these in the morning for the day. And it was great. I woke up, I took one, and then I just like vibed for the day. And when I say that, these are truly microdose. This does not feel like anything that you are imagining if you've never microdosed. They're just tiny little doses of something that'll just give you a certain sense of like calm or creativity or, whatever it is that you get from your microdosing.
They really do taste and feel amazing. I've used them for like chilling out, as I've said, like just sort of putting me in the mood to sleep, which has been really important. They're definitely a 10 out of 10 for me. They are also available nationwide. To learn more about microdosing THC, just do a quick search online or go to microdose.com and use the code FATEDMATES to get free shipping and 30% off your first order. We'll put the link in show notes, of course, but once again, microdose.com, and the code is FATEDMATES.
Thanks to Lumi Labs for sponsoring the episode.
You know what else I read that was really that I think we'll end up talking about some more is Fated Mate's favorite Kennedy Ryan has a new book coming out.
Oh, yeah, Before I Let Go.
Which has a gorgeous cover.
Right? Stunning.
It is so beautiful. And
Forever. Everybody at Forever in the design department gets a raise.
Yeah. And, that's like a big, like, nobody really does like a kind of a saga, like a real, like, drama-filled, angsty saga, right?
If you like Danielle Steele, read Kennedy Ryan.
Yeah.
It's how I feel about Kennedy.
And, it's not even just like marriage and trouble. I mean, these folks got divorced. And now they are
I love it.
Getting it back together, which is pretty great. And also, what else I read that was really fun is Macmillan is reprinting Stacey Abrams' Selena Montgomery titles and Rules of Engagement, which is their very romantic suspense is coming out, I think, either out this week or sometime in September. So that's also pretty cool to see those coming back out again with some really beautiful new covers. This one's really striking. It's one that's red, and it's the woman is in profile, and it's gorgeous. Gorgeous.
I fell into Victoria Vale in the last 2 weeks too. Victoria Vale is an erotic historical author who often gets recommended to me whenever I say, like, you know, who's got a sexy historical for me. And I had somehow, like, I downloaded a bunch of her books but never read any of them. And if you're looking for, like, erotic romance in a historical setting with a real deal anti-hero, The Villain by Victoria Vale. It's the first in a duology. It ends on a cliffhanger. Sorry, Jen.
Is the second one out yet?
Yep.
Oh, okay. All right. That's all I need to know, Sarah. That's all I need to know. Okay.
So that's good. So wait. So now let's get to the question. Now we've recommended a lot of books.
I mean,
we've done the job.
We have done the job. Okay, so we got a really, really fun question from a pretty new listener, and I was just really charmed by this question. And so let me read it to you. Let me find where I put it first of all. One of our newer listeners, a woman named Julie, sent us the following tweet. It said, Fated Mates, I'm still catching up, but have you all done an episode on introducing romance to kids? When is it age appropriate or less graphic? Does it have to be? I would love your thoughts on this. And then the follow-up tweet is really funny. I have an 8-year-old who shares my library account. So I often hear, Mom, your hold for dark demon desires during deep, dusky, dark, doom dark is ready. Want me to check it out for you? I assume at some point she'll get curious. And I was like, I could not love that question anymore. So
listen, also, I want to just pause and acknowledge that is obviously reference to Dark Desires After Dusk. No,
yeah,
to Dark Needs at Night's Edge.
Our big.
To dark Needs at Night's Edge, our baby Conrad Roth, who is the greatest beta who ever lived.
I love him. I love him.
Anyway, well, my answer, as I said, I'm on the record already on Twitter for this. But my answer was that I have here on my desk Lily Chu's Delightful, the stand-in.
Yes.
Which is a celebrity sort of switcheroo romance. Mm-hmm. There's a Chinese movie star who has like basically a doppelganger.
Yeah.
And the movie star needs to take a break for reasons, and the doppelganger has to step in and like pretend to be her. And then there's like a handsome other movie star, and it's, of course, chaos ensues, shenanigans.
Anybody could read that book. Yeah.
So my daughter, V, loves the cover of this book, and it is adorable. It's
like really cute.
A very cute cover. And she asked me what it was about, and I explain the plot of the book, and she understood instinctively that there was high conflict here. Like, right. Oh my God, what happens when everybody finds out, right?
Right.
And she was like, can I read it? And I said, sure. And I gave it to her because she's 8.
Yeah.
And I was like, let's see. Also, This book is fairly tame.
Yeah, I think there's kissing only in that book, maybe. Yeah.
And she got a few pages in and then abandon it because it wasn't very exciting in the first couple of pages for her. Like, she's
for an
8.
8-year-old, right? Exactly.
She really needs like a big explosion at the very beginning. And so it is an extremely delightful book, by the way,
of course,
for not 8-year-olds. So my answer was, why not?
Right. Because
they're gonna wander away
if it's not for them.
If they're not ready.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I think that is, I think one of the things I'm going to say that Sarah and I both started reading romance when we were in middle school, right? And I mean, like,
younger, yeah.
Yeah. So it was, I started reading like Sweet Valley High. I mean, like, looking back, it's clear I was always like romance oriented, right? Yeah. Of course. Like, I think back now and about how much I loved like Luke and Leia kissing and Empire Strikes Back. And I was like, oh, I've been this way my entire life, right? I think the thing that I would say is if you think you have a child who might be interested in romance, the easiest thing to do is like leave around, like if you leave books around and your kids are bored enough, they will pick them up if they're readers. Right. Mm-hmm. And if there's something that, and I guess I would say for me, the concern isn't about reading about sex. Other people might differ, and that's fine. I would be far more worried about my child picking up a Reacher book and reading all that violence. Right. But, different people are different. But what I would say is, and I'm sure I've said this before, our culture is very good at teaching us passively about the subjugation of like women and people of color and marginalized people, queer people, right? Like, so if you are not actively counteracting that, right? If you're not actively thinking, how can I counter message this? The society will do it for you. And so for me, I have said over and over again, and I understand that like not every romance is feminist, right? I understand that there are romances out there that could be, have some harmful messaging about a woman's place in her relationship. But I think a lot of mainstream kind of trade romance or right, is really a story about people who, right? They care about their jobs. They care about their families. They want to find love and happiness. Right?
Genre drives us to be our best selves.
Yes. And so I would
in the immortal words of Jane Eyre.
Yes, I would have zero feelings at all about my kid reading any book that like that. You know what I mean? And the thing about the sex part, I think for a lot of people is it is a strange assumption for me to assume that your kid by middle school has not seen porn.
Really?
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yeah. And I know that, listen, I know that is very hard to hear. But the internet makes it so easy for children to see porn. Right? I mean, even on Twitter. Like, I mean, I had a friend who was like, yeah, my kid was looking like
if you search for something all the time, I find
and you're
myself
like, oh my
accidentally
gosh,
like,
I accidentally found
what's
something.
happening.
So if you're
but I would say 8-year-olds,
not 8-year-olds,
are
of
not.
course.
Like, I'm pretty sure that my 8-year-old, and hopefully this 8-year-old too, hasn't quite gotten there yet. But
right. But I'm talking middle schoolers.
Yeah,
sorry,
middle school for sure.
So I would say, if you have middle schoolers who are readers, I would far rather my middle school child of any gender read any romance novel than, right?
I agree.
So
I do think that there is something to like knowing what your kids are reading, right? Like maybe you don't start them with Conrad Ross.
Of course not, right? Of course not,
I mean,
right?
my sweet baby.
Right.
But like if she had been into Lily Chu,
sure.
Yes.
Sure.
1,000%. Like, whatever you want to read. Because I've read that book. I know what goes on in that book. I'm happy. And also, and I think that is a big piece of the puzzle with readers. Like, she's going to tear through books. And so as long as we're in a position where I know what she's reading, and whenever I'm reading, she's like, "What's your book about?" And it used to be when she was 4, it was it's about people falling in love. But now I tell her the
more the
plot, and she's interested in that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, I guess, but that's none of this is as helpful as like where do you start? Like if somebody's if like you have an 8-year-old and they're interested in romance, where do you begin?
There are great middle grade books, right? Which often are like kind of categorized as 8 to 12. So I would go back and listen to our YA romance episode, right? Like, so for example, there is a YA author named Barbara D who has wrote a book about like I think a girl in 5th or 6th grade, and they're putting on, I think the book is called Star-Crossed. And she's putting on, they're putting on a play of like Romeo and Juliet at school. And, she's like a little confused because she likes her friend who's a girl and her friend who's a boy. Right. And it's very age appropriate. There is another book by that same author, though, that is about like essentially like what you do when you're sort of like there's catcalling, or right, like what do girls do when they are targeted for being girls. I mean, so and I think that to me is the biggest difference between like when we were readers. Like there was Sweet Valley High, there was sort of like there was definitely like books for younger readers, and then it felt like it was like boom, adult books. And I feel like now the world of kid lit is so robust It's so robust that if you would go to your local library, if you think they're not bigoted, right, and say, like, hey, my kid is really interested in, you know, kind of these like real sweet love stories, or interested in like these kind of proto romances, right? Like, and a lot of them are about how important it is to be a good friend. Right? Yeah. Because the truth is, the basis of all good relationships is being a good friend. Yeah. And I think that there's tons and tons and tons of books that you know, your kid might like, that essentially could be like at some point an on-ramp to romance. But no, I mean, would I give an 8-year-old like these books? But no. But would I stop them from reading them? I wouldn't either. And I will say, one of the things that has been hard for me, and I understand, like, look, everybody is different. But sometimes I will see people who say, like, oh, yeah, I started reading romance when I was in middle school, kind of balk at giving their kids romance because of the sex. And I'm like, look, are you sex positive or not? And I know that's hard.
That's tricky.
It's tricky. Yeah. Right.
I'll say, not to toot my own horn, but if you are a Sarah MacLean fan and you want your kids seem to be interested in historical stuff, there is a YA novel by Sarah MacLean called The Season. It is very, very sweet.
Yes.
In fact, I wrote it for a publisher who told me that these kids could not be in a bed together.
Sure.
So they,
of course,
sit on a bed together.
Fine.
And smooch. She's, I think, 17, the main character, but it is very sweet.
The thing I really like cling to at these moments is to remember, which is, look, I talk all the time about like why I want to read romance, right? Why do I want to read romance? I want to read about feelings, and I want to read about books where like women and girls and you know, like everyone who's a main character is important, right? It's not like I'm just, you know, no character is just like there to, right, make the other character feel feelings necessarily. Like, right, I'm not fridging anybody. But the thing about those books is those feelings when you are first like, oh my God, I think I might like someone. Do they like me? I have a feeling. Those are, you don't have to have even hand holding in a book to have that feeling be present.
Exactly.
Right?
I also just want to acknowledge that like some kids are not ready at 8 to be thinking about this stuff, or they know their friends are thinking about it and they aren't thinking about it. And I have a recommendation for a book for those kids too. And it's called Drew LeClaire Gets a Clue. And Drew LeClaire is named for Nancy Drew. And she is obsessed with a true crime like podcast. I mean, she's in middle school. I think she's in 6th grade, maybe 7th. But my 8-year-old is obsessed with this book, and it has a great audiobook too. And Drew's, when the book begins, there's a lot going on in Drew's life. Her parents are getting divorced. You know, it's rough. She's in the middle school and she's having a rough time. And her best friend, who is a boy, of many years, it turns out like a couple weeks earlier kissed her, and now it's awkward because she didn't want to kiss him back.
Yeah.
And so he has feelings. She has no feelings at all for him. But then over the course of the book, it starts to feel like maybe she just isn't. There's like, it could be that maybe she doesn't have feelings for anybody. It's possible she's sort of navigating the concept of like, am I ace?
Right.
Like, and then then there's a girl who like maybe she has feelings for her, and then it's sort of like there's a moment where there's a question of like, well, wait, maybe I'm bi, or maybe like, but over the course of this book, Drew does not find romance, but she does explore herself.
I love
and
this.
Like the way she feels, and it feels really authentic. Also, the rep in this book is great. There are fat characters, and there are characters of color, and there are characters across the spectrum of gender and sexuality. And I just love this book. My daughter's read it multiple times now.
Love it. I love that.
And there's also like a great mystery. Somebody has like created an Instagram account, and they're like posting embarrassing stuff about other kids in the school, and Drew and her friends are like trying to figure out who the bad guy is. And it's just It's very fun. But also has lots of that complicated stuff in it.
Well, and that's, you know what? I think we are so lucky. Kids these days are so lucky to have books like this, right? Where we
didn't have this.
We didn't. No, I mean there was only like cis het romance and like, you know, and I feel like the other thing I would just say to those of you out there with like kids who are like starting to, cause maybe you're worried, like not worried, but maybe you're like, are they curious? You're wondering, sorry, if they're curious. The thing to remember is like, try to avoid being heteronormative, right? Like, don't say to your kids, like, oh, you know, if you have a girl, don't be like, oh, do you like boys? Like, you can talk instead about like who you'd want to make a family with, like who are your friends, you know, who's someone you might want to date one day. Like, there's so many ways to just subtly signal to your kids that you love them and you want them to find the happiness of their own identity. And it's not about sort of necessarily, right? Like, I'm going to assume that like every girl is going to date a boy one day, etc. Or, you know, to just use the phrase all genders instead of the other gender. Like, there's so many subtle ways in which you as a parent can just really signal like, this is your journey that you're on. And we as parents or as aunties or as friends are here to help you like figure out what that might mean. And there are more books than ever. And, you know, at an upcoming episode, we're going to talk about what's happening in libraries because we're very concerned about it. But you in your home have a lot of power and a lot of ways that you can put your kids in charge of their own identity as friends, as a future person who may or may not be interested in romance or sex. And we are really lucky to have books that center a lot of those experiences in ways that are really friendly to kids.
Yes. If you are listening and you have a great recommendation for a book for somebody who's 8 to 12 or 8 to 15 who's like asking questions or seems to be into romance, but you know, where do we go from here? Please let us know on Twitter at FateOfMates or on Instagram at FateOfMatesPod. We'll share them when we get them. We'll retweet them and share them. And thanks for asking us that cool question.
It's a great question.
I started reading romance when I was like 10 and I didn't understand a word of it.
And it's fine. You know, Velvet Cave.
I understood those feelings.
Exactly.
And I was like, I want that. That is the end of episode 1 of season 5. Next week, we will be back with
Marrying Winterborn. Yeah.
Will it be Marrying Winterborn next week?
It could be.
Who can say? You better rush out and get it. Marrying Winterborn is by our very, very favorite Lisa Kleypas, who we love more than anything. Lisa, if you're listening, please come on the podcast. We'd love to have you anytime. Derek Raven Day is coming. And what else? I've already talked about Twitter and Instagram. You can find more, including show notes and transcripts for our Trailblazer episodes are going up slowly. Thanks to Caroline for transcribing for us. You can find all of that at fatedmates.net. And thank you to our sponsors this week, Blair Babylon, Lumi Labs, and Mary Rudder. You can support us by supporting our sponsors. Have a great week, everybody.